Murdoch saving you does complicate the optics of things somewhat.
No, in this case, a dead hero is better than a live vigilante.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and after watching Daredevil Born Again, I just have one big question. Could this actually happen? So this series is supposed to be showing us the grounded side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and yet some pretty fantastical things happen in this season. So we're going to go through all of the incredibly weird stuff, and then talk to Doug's lawyer, Mike Mazzella, and Rebecca Ann, a New York political strategist, to get their expert opinions. And remember to check out ScreenCrush on all your favorite podcast platforms, and time is running out to get your Daredevil parody merch. The No Fear hallway fight, the Battle of New York newspaper, Nelson and Murdoch tees, Rabbit in a Snowstorm, and the Fisk Can Fix It shirt and yard sign. Thanks for helping us out. Links are below. So first of all, I want to run through everything in the season that seemed far-fetched, and by the way, let me know in the comments what you think seemed far-fetched.
Or like a blind lawyer with superpowers?
No, that's just freaking awesome. I'm specifically talking about all of the political and legal aspects of the show. I mean, this is a world where the president was once kidnapped and placed in a supersuit, or where another president turned into a Hulk on the White House roof. But even then, seeing the mayor of New York open the police commissioner's skull is pretty unrealistic. And after I talk to Mike and Rebecca, I'm going to tell you guys what all of this means for season 2 in the wider MCU. So first of all, we have the actual election of Wilson Fisk. I mean, the guy is a well-known criminal. He served time in a federal penitentiary. But then again, Donald Trump's felony conviction only motivated his base. And many renowned world leaders like Nelson Mandela were wrongfully imprisoned. And there's one thing that seems to be true in American politics. We always go for the outsider. We want the revolutionary, the person with new ideas. This is why presidential elections tend to alternate between parties, regardless of how things are actually doing at that time. It's why celebrity politicians like Reagan, Trump, and Schwarzenegger got so much attention during their runs. It's also weird that Fisk is even out of jail. So in this episode, we find out that Fisk was released because of the FBI corruption scandal.
Now just say right now?
Well, Daredevil season 1 ended with a crooked cop flipping on Fisk and exposing his whole operation. So Fisk was convicted of federal crimes like racketeering, bribery, etc. But in season 3, he turned snitch to expose his competitors and then used his testimony to get special treatment. Next thing you know, he was actually giving the FBI orders. And then he swayed one agent, Benjamin Poindexter, to become an assassin. So Vanessa is claiming that this FBI scandal, which Wilson Fisk caused, was how he was released. I definitely want to ask Mike about that later on. One of the things I loved most about Daredevil Born Again was seeing how Wilson Fisk was able to manipulate the political norms to create a kind of false reality, like when he gives his alternative facts about the events of season 1.
10 years I built that operation. It was totally fail-proof. He had me unjustly arrested. He took down my entire business.
This is one of those moments when the MCU lines up just a little too closely with real life. Because, let's face it, the biggest problem in our world today is that we don't know what news we can trust. Most mainstream media sites have a profit bias. They just want to feed you stories that up your engagement and confirm your existing bias. And that's why, if you want to cut through the bias and hear the real news, I recommend Ground News. They're the sponsor of this video. I use Ground News every day. I like it so much, I subscribed on my own. So Ground News is an app and website that gathers related articles from across the world into one place, but they give you the context about the source's political leaning, their reliability, and most importantly, their ownership. This means that you can see through the bias and think critically about the news that you consume. For instance, here's a story about the White House considering slashing the tariffs on China. I can see left-leaning sources editorializing, calling this White House confusion, while sources on the right tend to use language like seeking to relieve tension, while center sources focus on the results, like how oil prices are now dropping. So I want to know that the news isn't trying to sway me one way or the other. So Ground News even has a blind spot section that shows you news stories that each side is ignoring. For instance, here's a story about how congressional Democrats' poll numbers are plummeting among young people, or this one about the long-term effects of Tesla's plummeting stock price, which was underreported by the right. Ground News is an incredible resource, and I've been looking for a service like Ground News for years, so I highly encourage you to check them out. If you go to ground.news/SC or click this QR code, you'll get 40% off their Vantage plan, which includes unlimited access to every feature. Your subscription will not only help out our channel, but you'll also be supporting an independent platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. Now, back to Daredevil. Now, it's also strange that Wilson Fisk was able to gather so much popular support to win the general election to begin with. I mean, the primary is one thing, but you would think that his career as a criminal would disqualify him. But people seem to be so disenchanted with people in power that they want someone who is different. I mean, like Daniel says,
Mayor Fisk. That's the coolest fucking thing on the planet.
I'm also not sure why Gallo had to personally go to Albany to talk to the governor, or why Fisk ripped off his head instead of just firing him. I'm also not sure if the mayor has such total authority over the police that he could form his own personal squad that answers straight to him. It seems like there would be a bureaucracy in place to prevent this. But the most far-fetched thing about this episode is probably that Fisk could unilaterally cut power off to the entire city and then take none of the blame for doing so. Con Ed is the power company that services New York, and they are a publicly traded company, not a public utility. So Fisk ordering them to shut down the power would be like the mayor ordering all of the targets in the city to shut down.
Shut it down. Shut it all down.
And I'm not even sure how popular Wilson Fisk would be after any of this. I mean, I definitely think that the federal government would have stepped in to prevent him from ordering martial law, since mayors aren't the kings of their cities. Guys, I am so lucky. We are joined by two actual real experts. We have Doug's lawyer, Mike Mazzella, and we have Rebecca Ann, who is a New York City political operative who actually did choose to come talk to us on this channel. I have a lot of questions for you guys. So we have, Rebecca, you're so experienced in mayoral politics. Mike, you're familiar, you've been on the show before talking about legal aspects of it. So let's run through this show. Let's find out how much of this was actually realistic and how much is like less realistic than, aliens, androids, and wizards.
The big three.
What big three?
Androids, aliens, and wizards.
Let's start with the election. Rebecca, how grounded and realistic do you think this the election of Wilson Fisk was, the way they portrayed it in the show?
First of all, we don't do special elections in New York City, so the whole premise was distracting when I watched the pilot. We do special elections when elected officials die, retire, or resign.
It was a recall election, right? Like the governor of California?
Yeah, we don't do recalls in New York State.
Oh. We also don't have aliens falling from the sky, but okay, all right. That works.
And, if he was running in a primary, which I don't think he would be, we have closed primaries where you can only vote for people who are enrolled in the same party as you. I don't think he would participate in the primary process. There's a matching funds program where you can, if you donate to a mayoral candidate for a primary, your donations are matched 8-1. So if you donate $10 to a candidate who really appealed to you, your donation, the city would match it by like $80. So your $10 donation gets you $90. Okay. And would Fisk participate in the public matching funds program, or would he self-fund? And against,
probably self-funded, I would say.
Yeah, self-funded. But then there's also the New York City political machine. There are legal technicalities to stop Fisk from even getting on the ballot that the existing political machine has done before in races I've worked on.
Because he was a twice convicted felon, and I'm trying to remember, he was convicted of federal crimes, I think, both times he was convicted, if I remember right. Is that part of the legality of this?
Yeah, federal crimes, but it's also violent federal crimes, for petty civil crimes, embezzlement, and civil penalties like speeding tickets. They're kind of more generous about it if you can help pass their agenda. But if it's actually violent crime like murder or the violent Wilson
Fisk murder, in this episode, and Mike, I think I need your help on this. In this episode, Vanessa's talking to Poindexter / the audience and tells him, because of the FBI corruption scandal, everything got thrown out. So if you're watching and you don't remember the show in Daredevil Season 3, basically Fisk bribes and manipulates the FBI. He promises that he's been convicted since Season 1. He promises he'll flip on all the other gangsters he worked with. And then he ends up essentially controlling part of the FBI, including Poindexter and Agent Nadeem. And then Matt, at the end of the season, says, if you turn yourself in and don't fight this, then I won't bring evidence against Vanessa. And then we find out, Mike, that none of that applies because the FBI scandal meant that he was released.
But here, I think that, the credibility of those FBI agents is what all of the evidence in the case rests on. They have to testify to what they witnessed and what they heard and what they uncovered. And if the credibility of that person is in question, then the prosecution might decide to drop charges or to not bring a case. In this case, you have Poindexter, who's already been convicted. He's in jail, but he can, of course, appeal, right? He can appeal his conviction, especially if new evidence comes to light. And if it was found that those FBI agents were corrupt or were engaged in bribery or sweeping evidence under the rug, that is certainly new evidence that could justify him either having a new trial or being exonerated and being released.
Okay, so there you go, Rebecca. In mayoral politics, if you've been cleared of crimes like that, are there still safeguards in place to make sure? Because I kind of think Fisk would bribe his way past a lot of this machine, but we also see him kissing a lot of ass and hitting doors at the start. So do you think, given what Mike said, he would have removed some of those roadblocks you're talking about?
I mean, he does have the money to bribe every member of the elite, like, political machine to get his way onto the ballot, but there are also a team of election lawyers who aren't part of the machine, who would also try to challenge his petitions and ballot access to get him off the ballot line because he's a known criminal.
And a recall election, from what I know from California, is basically a ballot initiative that says you want to essentially throw the mayor out and then have a special snap election that is like an open primary free-for-all. I remember when Schwarzenegger was in Gary Coleman and a porn star, like 80 different, it was like a circus to get him in there. So you're saying that would never happen, and also there's all these safeguards in place, but I feel like we should be keeping score here. Fisk could get out of jail based on what Mike said. That's really interesting. Now, the next thing I want to get into this is a little bit more political. In, I believe it's the second to last episode, maybe it's episode 7-ish, Wilson Fisk goes on this rant. He's talking to Buck about his version of reality, of his alternative facts, where he says, like, Daredevil took down me, an honest businessman. I built this empire of hardworking blue-collar Americans, a lot of code words seeded in there. As far as the campaign that Wilson Fisk ran, I think it's pretty obvious the filmmakers were trying to say, here's this celebrity politician who's a convicted felon, and drawing a parallel between him and Trump, but also other celebrity politicians throughout the years, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronald Reagan. I think those are more direct in the first 2 episodes. Based on what you know of politics, do you think there's a chance, given like how dissatisfied people are with the status quo, that a Wilson Fisk could convince people that it was all, a conspiracy and he's out to protect them?
Yes and no. For mayoral elections in New York City, turnout is abysmal. It's like 17% of the electorate.
Wow.
And so actually a small percentage of New Yorkers actually decide who runs the city, and it's people who are most engaged. Those voters who we call like triple prime super engaged voters would probably reject Fisk. But in a general election where it's still like maybe like 21%, and he could be appealing to people who usually sit out of an election because he has that reach. He has that Michael Gandolfini character who's like engaging with the youth, which really motivates people. But, at the same time, in my experience, whoever is trending online usually loses the election.
If you worked on the Fisk campaign, let's pretend that you're not you and you don't know Wilson. If you believed in this man's story and his vision, how would you have won that campaign?
I would pay off or kill everyone who could be witness to any violent crimes and just get them removed and like silenced in any way possible, and just lift up all like his vision about like rebuilding New York City to make it work for everyone, like what he did with Hell's Kitchen in like the early seasons of Daredevil. Right. That's the stuff I would like focus on. And that would be, we would like just send out, like just blast the airwaves and like paid media with that message and that like record of accomplishment and his vision of like making New York City like safer and like
gotcha.
Functional. Like that's what people want, is like a mayor that delivers results, which we haven't had in a while.
Mike, you have to admit that like de Blasio couldn't even get rid of the horses. Mike, you have to admit that you couldn't really ask for a better PR moment than Fisk found with that hole, right?
Oh, yeah. I think that was time.
A little suspicious, if you ask me. It's kind of like, I don't know. They never really...
If you were obsessed
I'm
with
obsessed
this
with
poll,
it.
You really want to know
it's a giant bottle.
What happened?
I lived in New York City, man. I've never seen a hole like that, unless it's like a sinkhole. But it certainly wouldn't be a hole that you could just fix with the stuff they had there.
I wouldn't know. In Chicago, all we have are rat holes. And they are
very much like this is staged. Like they planned this.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
But they never called back to it. I don't know. I'm not. Holgate is real.
One of those things where it's like this is what Fisk and some other politicians are like. That they take something that is emblematic of them solving a larger problem in the city and slap a Band-Aid on it or fix just that one insular, isolated thing and then say, well, look at all the good that I've done. Clearly, I fixed this hole. In the rest of my time, I must be filling other holes and not threatening and extorting people and committing brazen acts of murder with my bare hands. Surely.
There's a whole thing in this episode, right? And I'm going to get into martial law in just a second. But first, I want to talk about how Gallo's plan, right? He wants to go to Albany and talk to the governor. Apparently, he has to go in person. He can't use the phone or FaceTime or email or tweet. Is there a reason for that, Rebecca, or why is he going to Albany to begin with?
So when our current mayor was indicted, there were only two options to remove him, and one was the inability committee, which is, but that only is like if the mayor's incapacitated and really can't serve because of like health reasons or he's in a coma or whatever. And the other way he can be removed is by the governor, right? It's in like the state constitution that should like the governor can do that. So
for any city.
For any city in New York
Okay.
State.
Right.
And I think that would be like the only reason why I'd see like where you have to go in person. And I think maybe it's a safety issue because there's a target on his back too, because they know he's gonna try to do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And apparently he doesn't know how to drive. He's
No.
a New Yorker. Of course he doesn't know
New
how to
Yorkers
drive.
don't have a car, so
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't know how to rent one either. But because he's a New Yorker, he can't drive. I totally get that. Oh, no, but he used to live in Philly. I'm remembering this now. See, there's all sorts of holes in this plot line that don't work.
real quick, like when he became mayor, he could appoint his own police commissioner, so I don't see why he didn't just replace him.
I think, well, no, I know what I think. I think it was. I think that and they kind of addressed this, he saw the police department failing. It was defunded. He made no effort to keep it funded, and he wanted a scapegoat for that to earn their loyalty. It's kind of like, the whole thing's a metaphor for Animal Farm and Napoleon raising the puppies and stuff. Yeah. He needed the puppies to be hungry and starve so he could train them to do his bidding. Let's talk about martial law. And Mike, I definitely want you to chime in on this and talk about the writ of habeas corpus and stuff like that. Rebecca, can you explain to me the powers of the mayor to declare martial law in New York City?
He can't.
Okay, Mike, let's talk about habeas corpus. So he can't. All right, that totally makes sense. Who can declare martial law?
The governor.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the
president. Yeah.
But a mayor of a city cannot declare martial law.
Question. He declared martial law the day after the power was out, correct? So the power had come back on. Okay. Cutting the power was his way to manufacture a crisis, but he also cut off the bridges and tunnels, and he sealed Manhattan and sealed everything off from the city. Why did he do that? Was this part of obviously the power outage was for a crisis to call martial law, but it was so only his cops could go from bridge to bridge?
I think he cut it so that, one, to create mass hysteria, create panic, and then within that panic and hysteria, his cops can do whatever they want. Two, next to London, I think that New York City is the most heavily canvassed place with CCTV cameras. And so you cut the power to the whole city. Now there's not as much surveillance. Who's watching the watchmen? The cops are going out and killing people and throwing masks on them.
Maybe cell phone towers are down
so
too.
Not only do you have crazy hysteria, you have very little oversight. Everyone is panicked about surviving and protecting themselves, so they're not looking out for each other. They're not taking notice of what's happening around them. So when a squad of cops that are well organized are hunting and killing people in the streets, as they were doing in this episode, it kind of flies by the radar, or there won't necessarily be repercussions or less chance of it leading back to Fisk because they've created all of this mass hysteria and cover by cutting out the power. Now, the martial law.
Real quick, Mike, I have a very quick question before we get into martial law. When either of you hear the phrase mass hysteria, do you always think cats and dogs living together, or is that just me?
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Every time I hear that phrase, I always think of that. All right, let's talk about martial law, because movies and TV shows have taught me an irrefutable fact that any executive can say, I declare martial law, and it exists. Is it simply that? Let's even pretend like the mayor, Rebecca, I see you shaking your head. Let's pretend like the mayor is able to declare martial law, right? Is it simply that easy? Mike, whoever wants to take it, for them to say, I declare bankruptcy. Is it like that?
No, I don't think it works exactly like that. I'm not exactly an expert on this and when it comes to matters of national security law. But essentially, my understanding of it is that there needs to be a justification for it. So there needs to be an overwhelming threat to public safety, such as riots in the street, some type of illness or disease, or war or maybe a natural disaster, something like that.
Check. Well, kind of check. The power outage. I mean, it was a
Right.
fake natural disaster, so
And
unnatural disaster. But
what
sure,
happens
okay.
when you declare martial law is it's essentially a suspension of habeas corpus, which means habeas corpus is Latin for produce the body. It means that you can't be held without evidence, right? There needs to be evidence that you've committed a crime in order for you to be held. And it doesn't need to be physical evidence. Again, it can be testimony, it can be eyewitness. So the police saying, I witnessed you throw those drugs out of your car, right? That's probable cause for an arrest, that you had the drugs. The drugs themselves would be the evidence, but also the testimony of the officer. So when we suspend habeas corpus, now no longer do they need evidence or necessarily even a good reason to detain somebody or to lock them up or to get them off the streets, or in, as was happening here, them using capital punishment, using lethal force against people. Now that is not justified under martial law. But again, what's happened here is that there's enough panic going on that they have the cover to be able to do that. And they can arrest on the spot any agitators or anybody that tries to stand up and say, hey, that's not right, or anybody that tries to film the police. Well, guess what? Now I'm just arresting you for nothing, which is what police do a lot anyways to begin with.
There's a scene in this episode where where Daniel goes to, what a great character, where he goes to city council, and I guess nobody's recording it because he's very obviously blackmailing them in the chamber. What was going on in that scene, Rebecca?
He was trying to bribe the city council to do his bidding, but they actually have this 51-person body actually has strong veto power against anything the mayor would be able to do. And even if they were bribable, there wouldn't be a majority to be able to approve this safer New York plan.
There's not very many people in the council. I mean, it's obviously a show, so they have a budget, but he basically talks to 2 or 3 people and that's it. Was that a public hearing they were having in the episode?
I believe it was at 4:30 a.m. in the middle of the night, so I don't think it's public hearing. And there is a lot of public hearing input process into legislation, and even whether it's legislation from the mayor or the city council, there is a public comment period that is open before anything can happen and anything gets enacted, even if it is martial law.
And what was the name of can you guys remind me the name of the legislation?
It was the Safe Streets Initiative. Something very generic like that. Which shows how much thought he put into it. Probably not much, because it is just an excuse for him to go out there and hunt down.
Right. I think it's better if it's vague. It's
what
better
does
if
safe
it's
mean?
exactly
safe at what cost?
Yeah. Exactly. So he puts this initiative through. There's no recording devices in the room, I assume. So it's some sort of clandestine meeting. We don't know. He might have also already had people in his pocket. You said that's a body of 51 people. So you need 26. Is there veto power? Is it simple majority? Is it 2/3?
It's 2/3. So they need
Gosh, okay. It's really hard to find the realism in this. But let's go back a little bit. Within the city itself, we get those annoying BB on the street interviews that overstayed their welcome by a few episodes that tell us what people think. They're a decent barometer for public opinion, but at the end of this show, I mean, we see what's behind the scenes. Mike, what do you think the popularity of this mayor is going to be? Or do you think people are too scared to speak out?
Do you think that he's going to be exposed as a murderer? Or
No, I'm asking, do you think that after this, there's going to be massive protests or people are going to rail about him on TikTok?
I think it's just...
Or do you think that people are going to look at him as a strong leader?
I think it's going to work exactly the way that the Kingpin wants it to work. He's not going to be blamed for the blackout. He's going to be blamed he's going to be given the credit for bringing the city back from that horrific, day and a half of chaos. And so far, from the public's perspective, he's got a pretty good track record. He put together the task force that killed Muse, so they think. He's the one that's making sure that people are not being killed or kidnapped or taken away during the blackouts, when really that is exactly what he's doing. He fixed the hole. Okay? The hole that the entire city was waiting to get fixed. It was front page news the next day. He fixed that hole. I think that they're going to be completely fleeced by this. I think the public is going to be as in love with Wilson Fisk as they have ever been. I also think the attempt on his life garners a lot of sympathy for him. And as he pointed out in this episode, could have been even more sympathetic had Matt Murdock also succumbed to his injuries from taking that bullet.
Rebecca, I just want to follow up with your opinion on this, because as somebody who's like, you've pointed out something I didn't know, that a very small percentage of New Yorkers even pay attention to the mayoral election. What does Fisk's popularity look like after this?
Probably lower than Eric Adams right now.
Really? Okay. Adams is polling in the teens, right?
Yeah, he's polling in the teens right now, but all the people that are polled didn't actually vote in the election for him. So everyone who voted for him will probably regret it. But then the general public, with all just rethinking it, with fixing.
Wait, are we still talking about Fisk, or are we talking about Eric Adams? We're talking about Fisk.
Thinking about Fisk now. Look, so he fixed the hole that he created, most likely, and then he told everyone that he caught Muse, who killed remarkable 60 plus people, which could help. But there's just so many New Yorkers who aren't plugged in to what's happening in city politics, so they don't have a strong opinion. They just it's about how they feel. Every time they did a BB on the street interview, I'm just these people won't vote.
Yeah.
So does their opinion matter that much? Or turnout is so low in mayoral elections and municipal elections in general. And I don't know. They could feel it's a mixed bag with tuned in voters. They're just no, this guy's full of shit. And then for everyday voters who are just he caught a mass murderer. He fixed a hole that he created. There was a purge going on with the power going out. He's actually doing something to try to rein it all in. They could see it's a good thing, but they also could see it as a violation of their civil rights and freedom to be New Yorkers and do whatever the hell they want.
All right, we got to wrap it up there, but that's really interesting. Final thought, Mike, could this happen? Yes or no?
Wilson Fisk rip a man's jaw from his face with his bare hands? Yes, he absolutely could do that.
Okay, great. Rebecca, could this happen, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's even more frightening than I thought it was at the start of this interview. Guys, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it. Now, given how unrealistic this is, it does tell us something important about the MCU, that in this world, people are just kind of accepting of fantastical things. I mean, this is a world where half the population was snapped away, where aliens have come out of the sky to invade the city, so it sort of seems normal to them that a mayor could declare martial law and pronounce himself King of New York. And we also see that people are really hankering for a kind of normalcy. I mean, people look back on those days 20 years ago, before superheroes and aliens, and they just want to feel in control again. And I think that because of this, we should see the popularity of Fisk soar in season 2. However, for the premise of this show to succeed, they have to bring in other heroes. If they want the scale of this series to feel big, to feel like New York, we have to see Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, Kate Bishop, and most importantly, Spider-Man. I don't think this premise works unless this huge citywide event is affecting every superhero who is in New York. If you want us to believe that this is a cohesive, connected universe, then you have to connect it. This has been, I think, the major flaw in the multiverse saga. We needed team-ups. We needed Avengers movies. I think fans don't mind doing the homework of watching every movie and show, but we want to know why we're doing the homework. Do I need to watch Agatha all along before I watch the next Avengers movie? Or in this case, do I need to watch Daredevil before the next Spider-Man movie? Look, guys, I know there are legal entanglements with Sony over this, but it just has to happen. Find some money, make it happen. Spider-Man and Daredevil are two of the greatest team-ups in all of comics, and it's time to bring them together. Wilson Fisk's takeover of New York City should be a seismic event in this universe. This should be on the scale of the Chitauri invasion. This could be showing other criminals that there's ways for them to take power that have nothing to do with beating up superheroes. He should be waving a flag to every other villain in this universe that they could sway people to their side. They could get popular opinion to give them power instead of them trying to take power. And if the scale is that that big, everybody should be involved in this. Sam Wilson, Bucky, every single superhero has something to lose in this battle. So by the end of season 2 or in season 3, I think we need to see an Avengers level threat be addressed with everyone coming to bear against Wilson Fisk in this show. But that's just what I think. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.